"You don't belong in first class, old man. Get out." Those were the last words the flight attendant said before security dragged an 80-year-old man off Flight 402 like a criminal. They mocked his worn-out coat. They laughed at his silence. They thought he was a nobody. They were wrong. Dead wrong. That nobody was Augustus King, the silent majority shareholder of the very airline humiliating him. He didn't scream. He didn't fight. He just dusted off his coat, picked up his phone, and made one terrifying call. Execute the liquidity clause. Pull it all. Every penny. Within 20 minutes, the airline didn't just lose a passenger. They lost $4 billion. This is the story of the most expensive mistake in aviation history. The first-class cabin of Horizon Air Flight 402, bound for London from JFK, smelled of lavender mist and expensive leather. It was a scent designed to separate the haves from the have-nots, a sensory barrier that whispered, "You have arrived." Augustus King adjusted his glasses, trying to find a comfortable position in seat 2A. He didn't look like he had arrived. In fact, to the untrained eye, he looked like he was lost. Augustus was 82 years old. His skin, the color of deep mahogany, was etched with the map of a life lived hard and long. He wore a tweed jacket that had been fashionable in 1998, frayed at the elbows, and a pair of corduroy trousers that had seen better decades. He clutched a worn leather satchel to his chest as if it contained state secrets. It didn't. It contained a half-eaten ham sandwich, a paperback novel by James Baldwin, and a folder of documents that were worth more than the GDP of a small country. Augustus wasn't just rich. He was infrastructure rich. He didn't buy Ferraris. He bought the shipping lanes the Ferraris were transported on. He didn't buy champagne. He owned the glass factories that made the bottles. But today he was just a tired old man wanting to visit his granddaughter in London. "Excuse me." The voice was sharp, nasal, and dripping with a sugary venom. Augustus looked up. Standing over him was Tiffany. She was the lead flight attendant, a woman who wore her uniform not as a service attire, but as a badge of authority. Her hair was pulled back so tightly it seemed to be pulling her eyelids up, and her lips were painted a shade of red that looked like a warning sign. "Yes, miss?" Augustus said, his voice raspy but gentle. "I need to see your boarding pass," Tiffany said, not making eye contact. She was busy scanning the aisle, looking for someone else. Augustus fumbled in his pocket. His hands shook slightly, a touch of arthritis, nothing more, but Tiffany tapped her foot impatiently. He produced the crumpled piece of paper. Tiffany snatched it from his hand. She stared at it, frowning. Seat 2A, first class, paid in full. She looked at the ticket. Then she looked at Augustus's shoes, scuffed loafers from a department store that went out of business 10 years ago. Then she looked at the heavy gold ring on the finger of the man sitting across the aisle in 2B. "There must be a computer error," Tiffany muttered, more to herself than to him. She handed the ticket back with 2 fingers, as if it were contaminated. "Just wait here. Don't touch the champagne." She spun on her heel and marched toward the galley. Augustus sighed and looked out the window. He was used to this. In America, money was loud. If you weren't wearing a Rolex the size of a dinner plate, people assumed you were broke. He didn't mind. He preferred the invisibility. It allowed him to observe. And what he observed next made his stomach turn. A commotion at the front of the plane signaled the arrival of the real VIPs. A young man, probably in his mid-20s, burst into the cabin. He was wearing a neon green hoodie that likely cost $2,000, ripped jeans and sunglasses, despite being inside a dim aircraft. He was talking loudly into a phone on speaker. "Bro, I'm telling you, the views are gonna be insane. Yeah, I'm boarding now. Horizon treats me like a king, bro. Total loyalty. This was Chad Kensington, an influencer, a brand ambassador, the kind of person who was famous for being famous. Behind him trailed an entourage of 2 terrified-looking assistants carrying camera gear. Chad stopped at row 2. He looked at his ticket. Seat 2B. Then he looked at seat 2A. He looked at Augustus. Chad lowered his sunglasses. Ugh, seriously? He turned to Tiffany, who had rushed back, a fake smile plastered on her face. Tiff, babe, Chad said, snapping his fingers. We have a problem. I need 2A for the lighting. The sun comes in on the left side during takeoff. I need the golden hour for the vlog. Plus, my assistant needs a seat next to me to hold the boom mic. Tiffany's face went pale. Mr. Kensington, the cabin is fully booked. Seat 2A is taken by that gentleman. Chad laughed. It was a dry, barking sound. That guy? He looks like he wandered in from the bus station. Look, just move him. Put him in coach. I'll tag the airline in my story. Do you know how many impressions that is? 3 million, Tiff. 3 million. Tiffany looked at Chad. She looked at Augustus. In her mind, the calculation was simple. Chad Kensington was the future. He was trending. He was loud. Augustus King was the past. He was quiet. He was old. And most importantly to her prejudice, he didn't look like he could fight back. She walked over to Augustus. The sugary venom was gone. Now, it was just ice. Sir, she said, loud enough for the whole cabin to hear, I'm going to need you to grab your things. Augustus blinked. He had been reading the safety manual, a habit from his days as a structural engineer. I beg your pardon? We have a seating conflict. Tiffany lied. She didn't even blush. This seat is double booked. It's a system glitch. Since you were the last to check in, I checked in 3 hours ago, Augustus said softly. Since you are holding a ticket that has been flagged, she improvised poorly, I need to move you to the main cabin. We have a lovely middle seat in row 34 available. The cabin went quiet. The other first-class passengers buried their noses in their iPads, sensing the awkwardness and choosing willful blindness. Augustus placed his hands on his lap. He felt the familiar cold steel of resolve in his spine. He had faced down union strikes in the 70s, hostile takeovers in the 80s, and Senate hearings in the 90s. He wasn't going to be moved by a flight attendant named Tiffany. Young lady, Augustus said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming firm. I paid $4,000 for this seat. I selected it because I have a bad hip and I need the legroom on the left side. I am not moving. Chad Kensington groaned loudly. Oh my God, bro. He's going to make this a whole thing. I'm going to lose the light. Tiffany's eyes narrowed. Sir, please don't make this difficult. Mr. Kensington is a Diamond Medallion member. We prioritize our premium partners. I don't care if he is the King of England, Augustus said. This is a contract. I paid. I am seated. That is the end of the transaction. It is not the end, Tiffany snapped. She leaned in, invading his personal space. This is a private aircraft. You comply with crew instructions, or you are in violation of federal aviation regulations. Now get up, or I will have you removed. Augustus looked at her name tag. Tiffany Miller, lead purser. Ms. Miller, Augustus said slowly, I strongly suggest you check the passenger manifest again. Look at the notes under my name. Tiffany rolled her eyes. I don't have time to read your life story, sir. You're holding up the flight. A man in seat 3C, a businessman in a suit, finally spoke up. Hey, look, he's an old guy. Just let him stay. I'll switch with the kid if it's that big of a deal. Stay out of this, sir, Tiffany barked, turning on the businessman. This is a security matter now. She turned back to Augustus. Last chance. Row 34, or the terminal. Augustus slowly reached for his seatbelt and buckled it. The click echoed in the silent cabin. He folded his hands over his stomach and closed his eyes. "Do what you must," Augustus whispered. Tiffany's face turned a blotchy red. She felt her authority crumbling. She grabbed the interphone handset on the wall. "Captain, we have a non-compliant passenger in 2A. He's being aggressive. I need security at the gate. Now." Aggressive. Augustus King, who had built homeless shelters in Chicago and libraries in Atlanta, who hadn't raised his voice in 20 years, was being labeled aggressive because he refused to yield to a bully. Chad Kensington pulled out his phone. "Yo guys, you are not gonna believe this. Some boomer is hijacking the plane. Security is coming. Content gold, baby." He started filming. 10 minutes later, the heavy thud of boots on the jet bridge signaled the arrival of the enforcement. 2 airport security officers, burly men with tactical vests and tired eyes, squeezed into the first-class cabin. They weren't police. They were private security contractors hired by the airport authority, but they carried themselves with the swagger of SWAT team members. "Which one?" the lead officer asked. Tiffany pointed a manicured finger at Augustus. "Him. He's refusing crew instructions. He threatened me." "I did no such thing," Augustus said calmly, opening his eyes. "Sir, you need to grab your bag and come with us," the officer said, his hand resting on his belt. "I have a ticket," Augustus repeated. "I have rights." "Your rights ended when you stepped onto this private property," the officer said. "The pilot wants you off. That means you're trespassing. Let's go. Don't make me drag you." "I cannot walk very fast," Augustus said. "My hip." "We'll help you," the second officer sneered. They didn't wait for him to unbuckle. The first officer reached in and clicked the release. They grabbed Augustus by the arms, digging their fingers into the soft tweed of his jacket, pinching the frail skin underneath. "Ow! Careful!" Augustus gasped. "Stop resisting," the officer shouted, creating a scene for the cameras. They yanked him out of the seat. Augustus stumbled, his bad leg buckling under him. He fell to one knee in the aisle. His satchel spilled. The James Baldwin book slid across the floor. The folder of documents scattered. "Oh my God, look at this drama," Chad Kensington narrated, filming right in Augustus's face. "This is insane. Bye-bye, Grandpa." "My papers." Augustus reached for the documents. One of them was a debenture agreement for a bridge loan. Another was a shareholder proxy form. "Leave it," the officer shouted. He kicked the papers aside. "We'll send it to Lost and Found. Move." They hauled Augustus to his feet. They didn't let him walk with dignity. They pushed him. They marched him down the aisle, past the horrified faces of the other passengers. Some looked away in shame. Others, like Chad, kept filming, laughing. "That's what happens when you mess with the Alpha, bro," Chad yelled, as Augustus was shoved through the curtain. As they reached the aircraft door, the captain stepped out of the cockpit. Captain Derek Lewis. He looked at Augustus with disdain. "Sorry for the trouble, Captain," Tiffany said, smoothing her skirt. "He was impossible." "Good riddance," the captain muttered. "I've got a schedule to keep. Get him off my jet." Augustus looked at the captain. He looked at Tiffany. He memorized their faces. He didn't say a word. He saved his breath. The officers dragged him up the jet bridge. They didn't take him to a holding cell. They didn't take him to the police station. They simply marched him to the terminal gate area, opened the door, and shoved him out. Augustus stumbled forward, his momentum carrying him into a row of metal waiting chairs. He hit his shoulder hard against the armrest. Pain shot down his arm. He dropped to the floor, gasping for air. Behind him, the gate agent, a young woman who looked terrified, closed the jet bridge door. The flight was closed. The plane was leaving. Augustus King lay on the dirty carpet of JFK Terminal 4, His jacket was torn. His hip was throbbing. He was humiliated. He was alone. People walked by, staring at the crazy old man on the floor. A mother pulled her child closer, steering him away. Augustus slowly sat up. He adjusted his glasses, which hung crookedly on his nose. He took a deep breath. He reached into his inner pocket. His phone was still there. He didn't call the police. He didn't call a lawyer. He dialed a number he had memorized 30 years ago. It rang twice. "This is the direct line of Nathaniel Roth, Chief Financial Officer of Sterling Vanguard Holdings," a crisp voice answered. "Who is this?" Augustus cleared his throat. His voice was no longer the raspy whisper of a tired old man. It was the voice of a man who moved mountains. "Nathaniel," Augustus said. "It's Gus." There was a pause on the other end, a pause of terrified recognition. "Mr. King? Sir? We weren't expecting to hear from you until the quarterly review. Is everything all right? You're supposed to be in the air." "I am not in the air, Nathaniel. I am on the floor of JFK Terminal 4. Sir, do you need an ambulance?" "No," Augustus said, his eyes fixing on the Horizon Air logo painted on the wall above the check-in desk. "I need you to open the portfolio. Find the Horizon Air account." "Horizon Air?" "Sir, we are their majority debt holder. We own 40% of their liquidity notes. We're in the middle of restructuring their loans." "Not anymore," Augustus said. "I want you to call the notes. All of them." "Sir," Nathaniel's voice trembled. "If we call the notes, they have to pay us back immediately. They don't have that kind of cash on hand. It will trigger a default. Their stock will crash. It will be a bloodbath." Augustus watched through the window as Flight 4002 pushed back from the gate. He saw the first-class window where Chad Kensington was sitting, likely sipping the champagne Augustus had paid for. "Nathaniel," Augustus said, his voice cold as liquid nitrogen. "Did I stutter?" "No, sir. Execute the call. Pull the $4 billion in credit lines. And dump the stock. I want it at zero by the time that plane lands in London." "Consider it done, Mr. King." Augustus hung up. He stood up, dusted off his knees, and sat in the waiting chair. He watched the plane taxi toward the runway. "Enjoy the flight," he whispered. While Augustus sat on the plastic chair in Terminal 4, watching the world pass him by, a digital apocalypse was beginning 3,000 miles away in a glass skyscraper in Manhattan. Nathaniel Roth, a man known on Wall Street as the Undertaker for his ability to bury companies, sat before a bank of 6 monitors. His finger hovered over the Enter key. He didn't hesitate. He respected Augustus King more than any man on earth. If Augustus said, "Burn it," Nathaniel brought the gasoline. Click. The command was sent to the Sterling Vanguard servers. "Call immediate repayment, Horizon Air Ventures. Liquidation of equity position, 45 million shares. Market order." In the financial world, speed is measured in microseconds. At the headquarters of Horizon Air in Dallas, Texas, the CIO, Gavin O'Connell, was enjoying a midday scotch. He was celebrating. Horizon had just posted record quarterly profits, mostly by cutting legroom and reducing staff salaries. He was feeling invincible. Then his assistant, a young woman named Sarah, burst into the office without knocking. "Mr. O'Connell, look at the ticker." Gavin frowned. "Sarah, what have I said about interrupting my—" "Look!" she screamed, pointing at the CNBC screen mounted on the wall. Gavin spun his chair around. The ticker at the bottom of the screen, usually a boring stream of green and white numbers, was flashing red. HZN, Horizon Air. 4050 theft, 12%. "What the hell?" Gavin stood up, spilling his scotch. "Get the CFO on the line. Why is it dropping?" "It's not just dropping, sir," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "It's free-falling. Someone is dumping stock. millions of shares, and we just got a fax from the bank. A fax? Who uses a fax? It's a formal notice of default, Sarah said, handing him a warm sheet of paper. Sterling Vanguard has called in their revolving credit facility, all of it. $4 billion, due immediately. Gavin's face went grey. That's impossible. We have a 30-year term with Augustus King. He's a silent partner. He never intervenes. The notice says it's due to a breach of good faith and operational negligence, Sarah read. On the screen, the number changed again. HZN. $28.52, 35%. Get me Augustus King on the phone. Gavin roared, sweat instantly beading on his forehead. Right now. We're trying, sir. His phone is going straight to voicemail, and Mr. Roth's office is saying they have no comment. In the trading pits of New York, panic was spreading like a virus. When a giant like Sterling Vanguard dumps a stock, everyone else assumes the company is dying. The algorithm bots picked up the sell order and joined in. HZN. 15 stores at 60%. Within 12 minutes, Horizon Air had lost $3 billion in market capitalization. Back in JFK Terminal 4, Augustus watched the news on a muted TV hanging above a bar. The headline flashed in bold yellow letters, Horizon Air stock crashes. Bankruptcy imminent. Augustus took a slow bite of a fresh bagel he had bought from a kiosk. He chewed slowly. Looks like turbulence, he murmured to himself. At the Horizon HQ, Gavin O'Connell was hyperventilating. The phone on his desk rang. It was the frantic operations manager. Gavin, the fuel suppliers at Heathrow just called. They saw the stock crash. They're refusing to refuel our jets on credit. They want cash up front. We don't have cash, Gavin screamed. Sterling Vanguard just took all our liquidity. Then the planes are stranded, Gavin. The fleet is grounded. Gavin slumped into his chair. In 20 minutes, his empire had turned into dust, and he had absolutely no idea why. 35,000 feet over the Atlantic Ocean, the chaos of the ground was beginning to seep into the pressurized bubble of Flight 402. For the first 2 hours, the flight had been exactly what Tiffany Miller wanted, a shrine to Chad Kensington. She had given him 3 extra bottles of Dom Perignon. She had let him fly his drone in the cabin, strictly illegal, to get a cool shot of the Isle. She was practically sitting in his lap, laughing at his jokes about the homeless guy they had kicked off. "You're a legend, Tiff," Chad said, snapping a selfie with her. "Real talk. That guy was harshing the vibe. Now we can party." "Anything for our VIPs," Tiffany cooed. In the cockpit, however, the mood had shifted from bored to terrified. Captain Derek Lewis was monitoring the autopilot when the AER's printer, a small device that prints text messages from dispatch, began to chatter. Zzzzt, zzzzt. Lewis tore off the slip of paper. He read it. He squinted and read it again. Urgent. Dispatch to FLT 402. Co-immediate OPS suspension. Do not incur ground costs. Credit lines frozen. Return to JFK advised if fuel permits. What? Lewis looked at his co-pilot, a younger man named Evans. Return to JFK? We're past the point of no return. We have to go to London. What does credit lines frozen mean? Evans asked. It means the company credit card just got declined, Lewis said, his stomach tightening. Check the sat phone. Call dispatch. Evans picked up the satellite phone. Dead air, Captain. No signal. Try the passenger Wi-Fi, Lewis ordered. Evans pulled out his iPad. Network error. Service suspended for non-payment. We're dark, Lewis whispered. The company. I think the company just went under. In the cabin, the first sign of trouble was the entertainment system. Chad Kensington was in the middle of watching a blockbuster movie when his screen went black. Yo! Chad yelled. Tiff! The TV died. Tiffany rushed over. I'm so sorry, Mr. Kensington. Let me reset it. She tapped the screen. Nothing. She looked around. every screen in first class was black. "Ladies and gentlemen," Tiffany announced, her voice trembling slightly. "We seem to be experiencing a minor technical glitch with the entertainment system. We will have it back up shortly." "This sucks," Chad whined. "I'm bored. Tiff, bring me another bottle." Tiffany went to the galley and opened the fridge. She grabbed a bottle of champagne. She tried to scan it into the inventory system on her handheld device. Error. Server unreachable. Authorization denied. Weird, she muttered. She decided to override it. She popped the cork. Suddenly, the plane banked sharply to the right. The seatbelt sign pinged on 3 times. That wasn't the code for turbulence. That was the code for crew briefing. Tiffany's interphone rang. It was the captain. "Tiffany, come to the cockpit. Now!" She hurried to the front, slipping inside. Captain Lewis looked like he had seen a ghost. "We have a problem," Lewis said. "The company is collapsing. We've been ordered to land at Heathrow, but ground services are refusing us. We might be arrested when we land." "Arrested?" Tiffany gasped. "For what?" "For flying a plane we can't pay for. And Tiffany, dispatch sent one last message before the system died completely. They asked about a passenger." Tiffany felt a cold stone drop in her gut. "Which passenger?" "Seat 2A, Augustus King. They wanted to know if he was on board." Tiffany's hand flew to her mouth. The old man." "They said," Lewis read from a crumpled paper, "owner requires confirmation of safety." Tiffany. Who exactly did we kick off this plane? Tiffany thought back to the frayed coat, the quiet demeanor, the name she hadn't bothered to Google. He was just a nobody, she whispered. "If dispatch is asking about him amidst a bankruptcy," Lewis said grimly, "he wasn't a nobody. He was the somebody." The approach to Heathrow was smooth, but the welcome was not. Usually, a flight like 402 would taxi to a prime gate at Terminal 3. But as the wheels touched down and the reverse thrusters roared, the tower gave them different instructions. "Horizon 402, vacate runway left. Hold at taxiway Bravo. Do not proceed to terminal. You are to hold on the remote apron." "Tower, this is Horizon 402, Captain Lewis radioed. "We have VIPs on board. We need a gate." "Negative, Horizon. Your landing fees haven't been paid. We have orders to impound the aircraft. Police are en route to escort crew and passengers." The plane rolled to a stop in a desolate corner of the airfield, far from the luxury of the terminal. The engines whined down into silence. Inside the cabin, Chad Kensington was furious. "Why are we stopping here? This is the middle of nowhere. I have a limo waiting." Tiffany didn't answer. She was looking out the porthole window. 3 black SUVs and 2 police cruisers were racing across the tarmac toward the plane. They weren't there for an autograph. The main cabin door opened. Cold London air rushed in. 2 British police officers boarded, followed by a man in a sharp grey suit holding a clipboard. This was Arthur Pendleton, a solicitor for the Sterling Vanguard London office. "Who is in charge here?" Pendleton asked, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the passengers. "I am," Captain Lewis said, stepping out of the cockpit. "Captain Lewis, you and your lead flight attendant, Ms. Miller, are to gather your personal effects. You are being detained for questioning regarding the unlawful removal of a passenger and breach of aviation contract." "This is insane!" Chad Kensington yelled, jumping up. "Do you know who I am? I'm an influencer. I'm live streaming this." Pendleton turned his cold gaze to Chad. "Ah, Mr. Kensington, the man who needed lighting. We have a writ of seizure for your camera equipment as evidence of the incident." "You can't touch my stuff." "I can," Pendleton said calm. "Furthermore, since your ticket was comped by the marketing department, a department that no longer exists as of an hour ago. You are technically a stowaway. Officer, please escort Mr. Kensington to the immigration holding facility." "No! No!" Chad shrieked as the bobbies grabbed his arms, much in the same way the security guards had grabbed Augustus. The irony was lost on him, but not on the other passengers. Pendleton then turned to Tiffany. She was shaking. "Ms. Miller," Pendleton said, "Mr. King wanted you to have this." He handed her a small envelope. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was her own name tag, the one she had pinned to her uniform that morning. But across it, in thick red marker, was written, "Terminated. You kicked the owner of the airline off his own plane," Pendleton said, loud enough for the business class cabin to hear. "Mr. Augustus King owns 60% of this carrier. Or rather, he did. He just bankrupted it to teach you a lesson about manners." The color drained from Tiffany's face so completely she looked like a statue. He owns the airline. He owns the financing, the fuel contracts, and the lease on this jet," Pendleton corrected. "And because of your security issue, he decided he didn't want to be in the airline business anymore. You didn't just lose your job, Ms. Miller. You cost 4,000 people their jobs." The businessman in seat 3C, the one who had tried to help Augustus, stood up. Wait. The old man. That was Augustus King, the billionaire philanthropist? "The same," Pendleton said. He looked at the businessman. "Sir, are you Mr. Davids?" "Yes." "Mr. King noted your kindness. He has arranged for a private car to take you to your destination. As for the rest of you, the buses will be here in an hour. The collapse of a $4 billion entity does not happen quietly. It sounds like 1,000 phones ringing at once. It looks like a ticker tape bleeding red. And, in the case of Horizon Air, it felt like the sudden depressurization of a cabin at 30,000 feet, violent, cold, and inescapable. For the first 24 hours following the incident on Flight 402, the world was in a state of confused speculation. The financial markets knew that Horizon Air had defaulted. The aviation world knew that a plane had been impounded at Heathrow. But the public, the millions of people scrolling through Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, only knew what Chad Kensington had shown them. And that was the first twist of the knife. Chad's video, which he had titled, "Kicking Off the Boomer, Law Hath First Class Life," by Grandpa, had been intended to rally his followers against a stubborn old man. But the internet is a fickle beast, and it has a collective detective intelligence that rivals the CIA. Within 3 hours of the video going live, a user on Reddit with the handle Aviation Watchdog paused the video at the 0:14 mark. They zoomed in on the scattered documents that the security guards had kicked across the floor. The user posted a screenshot with a red circle around a letterhead. The caption read, "Wait a minute. That letterhead says Sterling Vanguard Holdings, and that old man looks exactly like Augustus King. Did this idiot influencer just film the assault of the richest black man in American infrastructure?" The spark hit the gasoline. By the time Chad Kensington was released from the immigration holding cell at Heathrow, minus his professional camera gear, which remained seized, he turned his phone back on. He expected notifications of adoration. He expected his impressions to be through the roof. They were. But the sentiment was nuclear. His subscriber count, usually a steady climb, was in freefall. It looked like a slot machine spinning in reverse. 10,000, 50,000, 100,000. His direct messages were a flood of vitriol. "You laughed at a civil rights legend. Delete your account. I hope you walked to London." Chad stood on the curb outside Heathrow Terminal 3, rain drizzling on his neon hoodie, his hands shaking. He tried to call his agent, a man named Rick who usually tolerated Chad's antics because they paid the bills. "Rick, bro, you gotta help me spin this," Chad shouted into the phone, dodging a black taxi. "People are twisting the narrative. That old guy was aggressive. I have the footage." "Chad, shut up," Rick's voice was icy. "Do you have any idea who called me 10 minutes ago? The VP of marketing for Pepsi. They're pulling the sponsorship. Then Nike called. They're scrubbing your face from the campaign. You are radioactive, Chad." "What? They can't do that. I have contracts." "Read the morality clause, kid. You filmed yourself bullying an octogenarian who happens to be a national treasure. You're done. Don't call me. I'm blocking this number." The line went dead. Chad looked at his phone. A notification popped up from his bank app. "Alert. Suspicious activity. Multiple recurring payments from sponsors have been cancelled." He was stranded in London. His return ticket on Horizon was void because the airline no longer existed operationally. His credit cards were maxed out on the assumption of next month's sponsorship checks. Chad Kensington, the man who needed golden hour lighting, sat down on his suitcase on the wet pavement and wept. Not out of remorse, but out of the terrifying realization that for the first time in his life, he was exactly what he had called Augustus, a nobody. 3,000 miles away in Dallas, the scene was less emotional, but far more brutal. The boardroom of Horizon Air was usually a place of polished mahogany and self-congratulation. Today, it smelled of stale coffee and fear. Gavin O'Connell, the CEO who had ignored the warning signs, sat at the head of the table. Around him were the 12 members of the board of directors. They weren't looking at him. They were looking at the speakerphone in the center of the table. On the other end was Nathaniel Roth, speaking from the Sterling Vanguard offices in New York. "Mr. Roth," Gavin stammered, sweat staining the collar of his shirt. "We understand there has been a misunderstanding regarding the liquidity clause. We are prepared to offer Mr. King a formal apology and a seat on the board." Nathaniel's laugh was dry and short. "A seat on the board? Mr. O'Connell, Mr. King owned 40% of your debt. As of this morning, he has purchased the outstanding distressed bonds from your other 2 lenders. He doesn't want a seat on the board. He owns the table." "What are you saying?" a board member asked. "I am saying that Sterling Vanguard is exercising its right as the primary creditor to force an immediate restructuring. We are dissolving the current executive leadership team for gross negligence and reputational damage to the asset." "You can't just fire us," Gavin shouted. "We have golden parachutes, severance packages." "Check your contracts, Gavin," Nathaniel said smoothly. "Clause 14, Section B, termination for cause." The cause being the catastrophic mismanagement of the company's relationship with its primary shareholder. You kicked the owner off the plane, Gavin. That is the definition of negligence. You leave with nothing. Security is waiting outside the door to escort you out. Please leave your company phones and laptops on the table. The doors opened. 4 large men in dark suits walked in. They weren't police. They were private contractors. Gavin O'Connell stood up, his face purple. "This is a hostile takeover." "No," Nathaniel corrected. "This is a foreclosure. Goodbye, gentlemen." As Gavin was marched out of the building, he had ruled like a fiefdom. He passed the cubicles of the lower-level employees. They didn't look sympathetic. They had seen the stock price. They knew their 401ks had taken a hit. They watched him go with cold, hard stares. The captain goes down with the ship, but the CEO usually takes a lifeboat. Not this time. Tiffany Miller did not get a private car. She did not get a hotel voucher. After being released from police questioning at Heathrow, she was released on her own recognizance, pending a civil inquiry. She had to buy her own ticket home. She had to fly economy on a rival carrier, British Airways. She sat in a middle seat in row 42, squeezed between a crying baby and a backpacker who hadn't showered in days. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Augustus King's face. She saw the quiet dignity in his eyes when she threatened him. She heard herself saying, "You don't belong here." When she landed at JFK, she had to go to the Horizon crew offices to retrieve her personal car keys from her locker. The atmosphere in the crew lounge was funeral. Pilots and flight attendants were huddled in groups, crying or shouting on their phones. The airline had ceased operations. All flights were grounded. Thousands of people were wondering how they would pay their mortgages. Tiffany tried to keep her head down, pulling her coat collar up. She just wanted to get her keys and leave. "There she is," a voice sliced through the room. Tiffany froze. A senior captain, a man she had flown with for years, stood up. His face was red with anger. "That's her," he pointed. "The one who did it." The room went silent. 50 pairs of eyes turned to Tiffany. These were her friends, her colleagues, her drinking buddies. Now they looked at her like she was a disease. "Sarah," Tiffany whispered to a flight attendant she knew well. I didn't know." "You didn't know?" Sarah snapped, stepping back. "It wouldn't have mattered if he was a billionaire or a janitor, Tiffany. You threw an old man on the floor because you wanted to flirt with an influencer. And now? Now I can't pay for my daughter's braces. My pension is frozen. Because of you." "It wasn't just me," Tiffany pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "Captain Lewis authorized it." "And Captain Lewis is finished too," the senior pilot growled. "But you started the fire. Get out of here, Tiffany, before we call security on you." She ran. She grabbed her keys and ran to the parking lot. She sat in her car, the same car she had been so proud of buying, and screamed until her throat was raw. Her phone buzzed. It was an email from the Association of Flight Attendants. Subject: Revocation of Certification. Dear Ms. Miller, due to the gross violation of passenger safety protocols and federal regulations regarding the treatment of passengers, she was blacklisted. She would never work in the sky again. The only thing she was qualified to do, the only thing she had built her identity around, was gone. 1 week later, the dust began to settle. The wreckage of Horizon Air was being sorted through by lawyers and accountants. In a quiet, wood-panelled office in London, Augustus King sat by a fireplace. He was reading a book, a rare first edition of Invisible Man. The door opened, and Nathaniel Roth entered. He looked tired but accomplished. "It's done, Gus," Nathaniel said, sitting opposite him. "We've acquired the assets. We own the fleet, all 140 jets. We own the slots at JFK and Heathrow. We have the infrastructure." "And the staff?" Augustus asked, not looking up from his book. "We have the payroll data. We can rehire about 85% of them immediately. The pilots, the mechanics, the ground crew, the good ones. We've weeded out the management rot." Augustus closed the book. "Good. I don't want good people losing their homes because of bad leadership. That was never the goal." "We need a name, Gus," Nathaniel said. "The brand Horizon is poison. The public hates it." Augustus stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at the London skyline. "When I was a young man," Augustus said softly, "my father told me that the most expensive thing a man can own is his dignity. You can lose your wallet, you can lose your house, but if you lose your dignity, you are truly bankrupt. That airline, it tried to take my dignity. It stripped me of my agency because of how I looked." He turned back to Nathaniel. "Call it Dignity Air. And the motto? Every soul has a seat." Dignity Air, Nathaniel tested the name. "It has a ring to it. But Gus, We need a director of customer experience, someone who understands that motto, someone who isn't Tiffany. Augustus smiled, a genuine, crinkly-eyed smile. Do you remember the gate agent at JFK? The young woman? Yes. She was terrified. She was watching her superiors break the law, and she tried to stop them. I saw her hand trembling when she closed the jet bridge door. She looked at me with apology in her eyes. She had no power, but she had a conscience. Find her. Sarah Jenkins was cleaning out her locker at JFK Terminal 4. She had been a gate agent for Horizon for 3 years. It was a thankless job, getting yelled at for delays, handling lost bags, but it put food on the table for her and her son. Now she was unemployed. She had her cardboard box of personal items, a photo of her son, a stress ball, a stale bag of pretzels. She was walking toward the exit when a man in a sharp grey suit blocked her path. Miss Jenkins. Sarah clutched her box tighter. Look, I already turned in my badge. I don't want any trouble. I'm not here for your badge, the man said. My name is Arthur Pendleton. I work for Mr. Augustus King. Sarah went pale. Oh, God, is this about the flight? I swear I tried to tell Tiffany that seat 2A was occupied. I tried to— We know, Arthur interrupted gently. Mr. King saw you. He saw you try to intervene. He saw you pick up his book after they dragged him away. Sarah blinked. I just put it in lost and found. I didn't want it to get stepped on. Arthur smiled. That act of small kindness did not go unnoticed. Mr. King is launching a new airline. He wants you to work for him. Me? Sarah laughed nervously. I'm just a gate agent. Not anymore, Arthur said, handing her a thick envelope. He wants you to be the Vice President of Passenger Relations. He wants someone in charge who knows what it feels like to be powerless, so that no passenger ever feels that way again. Sarah dropped her box. Vice President? But I don't have a degree in business. Mr. King doesn't care about degrees. He cares about character. The starting salary is $180,000 a year, plus stock options, and full tuition coverage for your son, should he choose to go to university. Sarah stood in the middle of the busy terminal, the announcement system echoing around her. She looked at the envelope. She looked at Arthur. Tears welled in her eyes, not tears of fear, like Tiffany's, but tears of disbelief. Why? She whispered. Because, Arthur said, Mr. King believes that when you rebuild a house, you don't use the rotten wood. You find the pillars that held strong when the storm hit. You were a pillar, Sarah. While Sarah was being elevated, Captain Derek Lewis was facing his own tribunal. The Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, does not take kindly to pilots who allow security risks to escalate into viral assaults. Lewis sat before a review board in Washington, D.C. The room was sterile. Captain Lewis, the lead investigator said, adjusting his glasses. You stated in your report that you removed the passenger because he was aggressive. Yet the cockpit voice recorder and witness testimony suggest you never even spoke to him. You took the word of your flight attendant without verification. I was preparing for takeoff, Lewis said defensively. I trusted my crew. You are the captain. The investigator slammed his hand on the table. Your authority is absolute, but so is your responsibility. You allowed a paying passenger to be assaulted on your vessel because you wanted to accommodate a social media influencer. You compromised the integrity of the flight. The verdict was swift. Lewis wasn't just fired, he was grounded. At 55 years old, his career was over. He would spend the rest of his working years teaching simulator courses at a fraction of his salary, telling students, "Don't do what I did." He became a living lesson in the curriculum of aviation ethics, 6 months later. JFK Terminal 4 had been transformed. The old blue and white branding of Horizon Air was gone. In its place was a sleek, warm branding, deep charcoal and gold. Dignity Air. The gate area for Flight 001 to London was packed, but it wasn't just business executives. There were families, students, elderly tourists. Augustus King stood by the window, watching the Boeing 727 being loaded. The livery was beautiful, a golden phoenix rising on the tail. He wasn't flying first class today. He never flew first class anymore. He had ordered the removal of the first-class cabins from all Dignity airplanes. Instead, the entire plane was configured with Business Plus seating. Everyone got legroom. Everyone got a meal. "Mr. King?" He turned. Sarah Jenkins, now wearing a tailored suit that fit her role as VP, stood there. She looked confident, glowing. "We're ready for boarding, sir," she said. "Would you like to pre-board?" Augustus shook his head. "No, Sarah, I'll wait my turn." Group 4. Sarah smiled. "Sir, I have to tell you, we have a passenger list today. We have the CEO of Techstar, we have a famous actress, and we have a school teacher from the Bronx who saved up for 5 years for this trip." "Treat the teacher like the Queen," Augustus said, "and treat the CEO like a regular person. That is the policy." "Understood, sir." As the boarding call began, Augustus watched the line form. No one was shoving. No one was flashing platinum cards to cut the line. He saw a young man, maybe 20, struggling with a heavy bag. An older woman behind him stepped up and helped him lift it. They smiled at each other. Augustus felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with money. He had burned down a corrupt kingdom and built a village in its place. He had proven that the true power of wealth isn't in what you can buy, but in what you can change. He adjusted his glasses, picked up his old, tattered leather satchel, the same one that had been kicked across the floor, and joined the back of the line. He was just a passenger, and that was exactly who he wanted to be. Years later, business schools would study the Horizon event. They would analyze the liquidity clauses and the debt restructuring. They would talk about the speed of the stock collapse. But in the break rooms of airports and the galleys of planes, the staff told a different story. They told the story of the quiet man in the frayed coat. They told the story as a warning to the arrogant. Be careful who you step on. And they told it as a promise to the invisible. You are seen. Karma, Augustus proved, isn't just a cosmic force. Sometimes it's a phone call. Sometimes it's a contract. And sometimes it's an 80-year-old man who decides that enough is enough. The plane taxied out. The engines roared, a sound not of arrogance, but of progress. As Dignity Air Flight Lolzahor 1 lifted into the sky, piercing the clouds, the sun hit the golden phoenix on the tail. It shone blindingly bright, a beacon for anyone looking up. The bullies had been grounded. The kind had been elevated. And Augustus King, the invisible titan, finally closed his eyes and slept, soaring toward the horizon he had redrawn with his own hand. This story is a brutal reminder that character is revealed not in how we treat the powerful, but in how we treat the powerless. Tiffany and Chad saw a nobody and treated him like trash, never realizing they were standing in the shadow of a giant. Augustus King didn't use his money to buy luxury. He used it to buy justice. It cost him $4 billion to make a point, but the lesson he taught the world was priceless. What would you have done if you were Augustus? Would you have pulled the plug, or was that too harsh? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of massive karma, please smash that like button, share this video with someone who needs a reality check, and subscribe for more stories where the underdog bites back.